Okay, happy Sabbath, everybody. Today is November 20, 2021. And a couple of weeks ago, we started a series called Destruction Upon the Cities. And last week, we were studying about how the first city that was built, which is the city of Babel, was built by Nimrod, was destroyed. And how was it destroyed? We know it's because there was confusion among the within the language. But how was it actually physically destroyed? By lightning, right? By fire from heaven, right? Yeah, and then we also did about Sodom and Gomorrah, and then Nineveh, and Babylon, and also Jerusalem, right? And there's multiple things that we can study from it, because all these things will also, all these things will be repeated in our time. Okay, so today we will do what is called, from the spirit of prophecy, the earthquake vision. All right, we'll do the earthquake vision. And this is the vision of Ellen White. The vision of Ellen White that is about the judgments and the destruction upon cities by earthquake. And then from there, we'll transition to cities that will be destroyed by fire. All right. But first, we go the earthquake vision. Earthquake vision. Okay. In the Bible, do you know when there will be earthquake in diverse places? Where is it mentioned in the Bible that there's going to be destruction by earthquake in diverse places? It's a very popular, it's a very famous chapter in the Bible. Yeah, okay. You said Matthew, obviously. Yes, it is Matthew. Matthew verse 24, right? I remember Jesus was speaking to his disciples on the Mount of Olives. After he left Jerusalem, and he left that the temple, never to return to that temple. And on that, on Mount Olives, he spoke of what is going to happen before the destruction of Jerusalem, but also it's going to be the same thing that will happen at the end time, right? All right, Matthew 24, verse 7 to 9. For nation shall rise against nations, and kingdoms against kingdoms. What does that mean? That's a symbol of the sword, right? I put that as a sword, right? Nations shall rise against nations, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines. All right, I said that's my symbol for famines. And then pestilences. All right, pestilences. All right, sicknesses, infections, right? And earthquakes. All right. So sword is war between nations and kingdoms, famines, pestilence, and earthquake in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. All these things, this here is the beginning of sorrows. When we see all these things, beginning of sorrows. But does it mean that this is the time of the end? Does it mean that this is the end? Does it mean that this is the end yet? No, Jesus said this is not the end yet, right? Okay. And then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Okay, what does that mean? Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. What is that? If you summarize, what does that mean?
No, share screen.
Oh, we have to share screen. Sorry. Thank you. I better share screen. Okay. All right, let's do it over. Nations shall rise up against nations, and kingdoms against kingdoms. There shall be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, right? Sword, famine, pestilence, and earthquake in diverse places. And these things are the beginning of sorrows, right? And then what did it say? Then shall they deliver you up, and you shall be afflicted, and they shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. What is that? What does it mean that you will be hated of all nations for my name's sake? Persecuted. Persecute for the namesake of God. What is that? What are you being persecuted for? What's the persecution? For the namesake of God. The namesake of God is the character of God, is the law of God. You're going to be persecuted for following God's law. Which persecution is this talking about? Jesus is talking about which persecution? Which persecution is that? Here you go. You're going to be brought in front of judges. What is that? That's the Sunday law, right? It says, then it will be the Sunday law, right? These things happen before the Sunday law. The beginning of sorrows happens before the Sunday law. Then you will be persecuted for obeying God's law, for my name's sake, for having my character and my name, and obeying my law. You will be persecuted, right? Okay, right? So these things, when we see this, when we see all these things, it means what is coming up soon when we see the beginning of sorrows? It's close to the time of persecution of obeying God's law, which we know the final test is about the Sabbath, right? All right, okay. Now let's compare this. Obviously, this was written by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Mark is almost the same as in Matthew, but Luke is a little bit different. All right, let's look at the book of Luke. It's the 21st chapter. You might want to open that up, but it's obviously, I put it up here already. Okay. Then said he unto them, nation shall rise up against nation, and kingdoms against kingdom. What is that? That's the sword. And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and what? Famines and pestilences. But what does Luke add? What does Luke add? There's going to be fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Now this one, Luke adds, there's going to be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. Okay? But look at the beginning of verse 12. But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you, persecute you, and deliver you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. All right. According to Luke, when does this happen? Before or after the Sunday law? No, read it. But before all of these, you will be persecuted for the Sunday law. So when does this happen according to Luke?
Before Sunday law.
After Sunday law.
Before all of these, before the earthquake, famine, pestilence, and the fearful sights, they shall lay their hands on you. So this happens before or after? After Sunday law. Did we have to read this carefully, right? Do you agree that this is actually after the Sunday law? Before all of these things, earthquakes, famine, pestilence, and fearful sights and great signs there shall be from heaven. Before all of these, they shall lay the hands. So they will lay their hands on you, and then all these things will happen. Right? What will happen after they lay their hands on you? Then there will be the sword. Then there's going to be a great earthquake. And then there's going to be famine and pestilence and what? Fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Right? Is this the first time we ever noticed this before? Or we thought it was the exact same thing? No, it's not. So when we study the Bible, you have to be very careful, because Matthew, Mark, and Luke adds a little twist to the words of Jesus, which shows us something now that is hidden before. All right? Okay. The sword, the famine, pestilence, and earthquake in diverse places. All right. Let's see what Ellen White writes. What does Ellen White write? December 16, 1848. Remember, this is Early Writings 41.1. The Lord gave me a view of the shaking of the powers of the heavens. I saw that when the Lord said heaven, in giving the signs recorded by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he meant heaven. And when he said earth, he meant earth. Okay, when did the Lord said earth in Matthew? Let's go back to this. When did the Lord say earth in Matthew and Luke? Where is it, earth? Earthquake. That's earth. All right? Earthquake. So Ellen White says when you read this and then he mentions earthquake, it actually means he meant earth. The powers of heaven are the sun, moon, and stars. They rule in the heavens. The powers of earth are those that rule on the earth. So let's go back to this. So the earthquake is actually what? What is that actually that quakes? What did Ellen White just say? Is it only literal earthquake, or is it also, it also means the powers of the earth that quakes? What are the powers of the earth? The leaders of the nations, the power, those who lead the nations, those who rule the earth, right? Because the sun and the moon and the stars, they rule the heavens, and they are going to be shaken, right? And then when it says earth, it means earth. It means the powers of the earth are shaken. And the powers of the earth are those who rule the earth. All right? Wow. The powers of the earth are those that rule on the earth. These are the rulers. The powers of the earth, the powers of heaven will be shaken at the voice of God. Right? Then the sun, moon, and stars will be moved out of their place. They will not pass away, but be shaken by the voice of God. Right? Okay. Now we go to Revelation 16, because we know there's going to be shaking of the powers of heaven when the voice of God speaks. When does the voice of God speak and the powers of heaven, the sun, the moon, and the stars are shaken? During the seventh plague, right? During the seventh plague, Revelation 16, there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven, and we know this is the voice of God, from the throne of God, saying, "It is done." And there were voices, thundering, and lightnings. And we know these things. These things are like the great signs and sights and wonders from heaven, right? That Luke, in Luke 21 said. And there was a great earthquake. Now there was a great earthquake that was quaked by the voice of God, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And the cities of the nations fell because of the earthquake. And what else happens with the earthquake? We know when we study early writings or last day events or great controversy. What do we know when the Lord speaks, it is done, and there's an earthquake? What also happens to the graves? They're open. And who comes up? Who comes up? Who comes up? Who are resurrected at the seventh plague? At the seventh plague, who are resurrected? We call it the 1335. Those has been preaching the 3 angels' messages from henceforth. All right? Since 1844, those who have been preaching the 3 angels' message will be wakened up by the voice of God, and there's going to be an earthquake. Whenever divinity says it is done, and there's a great earthquake, the graves are open, right? So the Father is going to speak from the throne of heaven, and there's going to be earthquake, and there's going to be an opening of graves. And it is the select people who have been waiting from henceforth, right? Those who have preached the 3 angels' messages will be raised up. When Jesus died, what did he say? It is finished. And what happened? There is a great earthquake. And were graves open also? Yes, the graves are open. And who came up? The graves are open, and eventually the martyrs came up, right? But the martyrs stayed inside the graves. Even though the graves were open, the martyrs stayed inside the grave until when? Until Jesus was risen that Sunday morning, right? And then they all rose. But Jesus rose up, and then those martyrs also were risen, okay? So when divinity says it is done or it is finished, there's going to be a big earthquake, and nations will fall. The cities of the nations will fall, and there's going to be like at this time there's going to be a resurrection of it's called the special resurrection, right? And then after that, the great Babylon will come to remembrance before God. Why? Why does God remember Babylon? What is it about Babylon that God remembers? The iniquity, right? The sins of Babylon. Why does God still remember the sins of Babylon? Because it's never been confessed. What about the 144,000? Does God remember their sins? At this time? No more. It's already been confessed. It's already been blotted out, right? Here, the sins of Babylon here come in remembrance because it's never been confessed. It is still, so to speak, in the courtyard, right? It's never been taken into the holy place, right? The blood is still in the courtyard. It has not been cleansed, right? The great scroll is still in the porch. Remember when we studied about Zechariah, right? The sins are not in the holy place. It has not any chance to be blotted out because he has never been confessed, right? To give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath, because now Babylon has to drink of their own cup of the wine of the wrath of God, right? So there's going to be judgment. After this, it will going to be the judgment. So we have to revise this a little bit, right? All right. So we know this is the beginning of sorrows, and there's going to be the Sunday law. We call it the Sunday law. And according to Luke, right, there's the Sunday law, and then all these things will happen. But Ellen White said that the earthquake that happens is actually the powers of the earth that are shaken. So these are the leaders of the nations, the kings and rulers who are shaken, who are trembling, who their knees are knocking, like who? Like Belshazzar, right? Because their judgment is about to come, right? They see all these pestilences, famines, and wars, okay? And then there's going to be, and because of that, they will make a Sunday law, right? Because all of these things, this will be the beginning of sorrows, then you will have a Sunday law. And then according to Luke, the Sunday law starts first, and then there will be signs and wonders. There's going to be signs and wonders from heaven and earthquake. And, okay. And we know this is the seventh plague. Okay? If this is the seventh plague, then this is the time after the universal Sunday law. These are the 7 plagues, the last 7 plagues, right? If this is the universal Sunday law, and this is the 7th plague, what fills this blank is the first 6 plagues, right? These are the last 7 plagues. This is the beginning of sorrows. These are the last 7 plagues. So Luke was actually talking about the last 7 plagues. Okay. Because these things, the last 7 plagues, will happen after the Sunday law, right? Before these things, you will be persecuted for my name's sake. Before the last 7 plagues, right? Where's the pestilence in the last 7 plagues? Okay, my question. Where's the pestilence? Because there's a pestilence in the last 7 plagues. I already gave you this one, right? What's the first plague? What's the first plague? The first plague is the wrath that is poured on the earth. And what happens to the people? They will develop sores, right? Right? They will develop sores. They will develop pestilence. Okay. What's the second plague? The wrath is poured on the seas, and the seas turn to blood. There will be no fish, no life in the seas, no fish. Nobody can eat fish anymore, right? And now there's going to be, sorry, I have to go back. What's the third plague? It's not the sun yet. What's the third plague? The wrath is going to be poured on the rivers, and the rivers will be blood. There's no more drinking water. There's no fish to eat. There's no drinking water. And then what's the fourth plague? What's the fourth plague? The sun will scorch the earth, and man will be scorched. There's no vegetation. There's also no water already, and no fish. What happens? There's no fish, no vegetation. All the animals die because there's no vegetation. What's going to happen? Famine. So you have your pestilence, you have your famine, right? And then the wrath is poured on the seat of the beast, and there's going to be darkness. Wow. What does this mean? The seat of the beast. What is the seat? Seat is the government, right? The seat is the government, right? The shaking of the government of the beast, who with the dragon has caused the nations to go through an image of the beast and image to the beast test, right? Now the beast is shaken, right? The rulers of the earth is shaken, right? Okay. Okay, that's the darkness. What about the sixth plague? What's the sixth plague? It's the wrath of God is poured onto the river Euphrates, and the river of Euphrates is dried up, and they gathered for war in Armageddon. So what's that? They gather for war. It's the sword. So we see pestilence, we see famines, we see sword, we see war, right? Armageddon. And then we see earthquake, and then we see also earthquake. The earthquake and the sights and wonders in heaven. This is why Luke says all these things will happen, right? Will happen after, right? Will happen after the Sunday law, right? Because it's the last 7 plagues. Let's just go back here, right? Oh, sorry. I want to go back. But remember, you got to read Luke again, right? These things happen. All, before all these things, there'll be, you will be persecuted my name's sake. Luke says, before all these things, right? Before the last 7 plagues, which has pestilence, which has famine, which has the sword, and the earthquake, and the sights and wonders in heaven, before all of these things, you will be persecuted for my name's sake. All right? Okay. I use that. This is Luke. What is this? What is this? This is Matthew here. Matthew is before the Sunday law. Luke is after the Sunday law. So we see pestilences happen before Sunday law, and pestilence happen after Sunday law. In other words, pestilence do not stop. If we think the pestilence will stop, we just remember Christ's words in Matthew and Luke. Pestilence will keep coming. It will keep coming. Even after the Sunday law, the pestilence will still keep coming. All right? Okay, so if you want to look, the shaking, we have in Hebrew 12, Isaiah 13, Haggai 2, Revelation 16, Joel 3. During our study of what happens when the voice of God shakes the heavens, shakes the powers of heaven, and causes a big earthquake, right? There's going to be hail that's coming, all right? And there's going to be the graves that open, right? And then God will pronounce the date and the hour of Jesus coming. And also God will give a blessing to those who have kept the Sabbath, as well as repeat the eternal covenant, right? All these things we studied when we were studying about the special resurrection. Okay? All right. So that's a kind of like a circuitous explanation of earthquakes, right? Earthquakes is not only literal earthquake, but literal earthquake, but also the quaking of the powers of the earth, the quaking of the leaders of the earth, because they have seen all these calamities fall upon them. So they are shaking, right? The nations become angry. All right, that's another tangent. We don't want to go there yet. Okay, all right. Okay, so now we go to Ellen White, Spirit of Prophecy. Well-equipped tent meetings should be held in large cities, such as San Francisco. For not long hence, these cities will suffer under the judgments of God. San Francisco and Oakland are becoming as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord will visit them in wrath. Right? The Lord will visit them in wrath. San Francisco and Oakland becoming as Sodom and Gomorrah. She wrote this, look at this, September 1, 1902. Look at the date, 1902, right? 1902. San Francisco and Oakland will be visited by God in wrath, right? They will receive the judgments of God. She wrote this in 1902 because they have been wicked as Sodom and Gomorrah. There are reasons why we should not build in the cities. On these cities, God's judgments are soon to fall. Do not build in the cities, because on these cities, the judgment will soon to fall. She wrote this, and I put this in order. This is September 1. This is 5 weeks later, October 8, 1902. All right. This is April 20, 1903, right? Several months later. The message of warning should be sounded in the large wicked cities such as San Francisco. Well-equipped tent meetings should be held. San Francisco and Oakland are becoming as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord will visit them. In other words, Ellen White is making a prediction about specific cities, and she mentioned them by name. Oakland and San Francisco will be visited by the wrath of God. Nor far hence, it's not going to be far, it's soon. They will suffer under his judgments. Soon, San Francisco and Oakland will be, Remember these quotes, because Ellen White specifically named names of cities that will be visited by the wrath of God in judgment, right? And she had a timeline. Now she said, this is not way far in the future. It is going to be soon. The Lord will not suddenly cast off all transgressions or destroy entire nations. It is not going to happen that every city will be destroyed. How will it happen? But he will punish cities and places where men have given up themselves to the possessions of satanic agencies, right? It's not going to be all entire nations that are going to be destroyed, but cities by cities, right? Places where the wickedness is concentrated. Strictly will the cities of the nations be dealt with. Strictly will the cities of the nations be dealt with. And yet they will not be visited in the extreme of God's indignation. It's not the extreme. We're not seeing extreme judgment yet. Because some souls will yet break away from the delusions of the enemy and will repent. Right? So it's not extreme because why? Because some will still repent and be converted, while the masses will be treasuring up wrath against the day of wrath. She wrote this in, I put this in sequence, in 1906, April, right? 3 years later, April 27, 1906. All right? Okay. April 16, 1906. Now this was published in Review and Herald. Now, it was published on I don't remember whether it was published or it was written. Anyway, on April 16, 1906, and this was later published in Review and Herald, right? she wrote about an earthquake on a city. And remember, San Francisco was hit by a great earthquake 2 days later. She wrote this 2 days before the San Francisco earthquake. Remember, for about 3.5 years, like 3.5 years, she's been warning San Francisco and Oakland will be hit by the wrath of and judgment of the Lord, right? And now 2 days before it, she wrote about, and the title is the San Francisco earthquake, but this was published in May 24, but she actually wrote it on April 16, right? But it was published in the Review and Herald May 24, a month after the San Francisco earthquake. So she wrote it 2 days before. Now, where was she? She was in Loma Linda, right? And some people said, oh, when she was in Loma Linda, she saw an earthquake and the buildings in Loma Linda fell. Read this carefully. The actual heading, the title of this article is the San Francisco earthquake. She was in Loma Linda and she saw a city, right? And it was about San Francisco. She did not have a vision that Loma Linda was going to be destroyed by an earthquake. She did not, right? Some people say, oh, she had a vision about Loma Linda going to be destroyed by an earthquake. No, her vision while she was in Loma Linda talks about the San Francisco earthquake, right? On April 16th, after the dedication of the sanitarium, there passed before me a most wonderful representation, right? She had a vision about an earthquake. During the vision of the night, I stood on an eminence from which I could see houses shaken like a reed in the wind. Buildings, great and small, were falling to the ground. Pleasure resorts, theaters, hotels, and the homes of the wealthy were shaken and shattered. Many lives were blotted out of existence, and the air was filled with the shrieks of the injured and the terrified. Right? She had this vision on April 16th, right? And remember, the earthquake happened 2 days later. The destroying angels of God were at work. One touch and the buildings so thoroughly constructed that men regarded them as secure against every danger quickly became heaps of rubbish. There was no assurance of safety in any place. I did not feel in any special peril, but the awfulness of the scenes that passed before me I cannot find words to describe. It seemed that the forbearance of God was exhausted and that the judgment day had come. Right? It received the judgment of God 2 days before the San Francisco earthquake. The angel that stood, now that Review and Herald article was repeated, was republished in Testimonies Volume 9, page 93, right? That same vision, April 16 vision about the earthquake, was repeated in Testimonies Volume 9. And then she added, the angel that stood at my side then instructed me that but few have any conception of the wickedness existing in our world today, and especially the wickedness in the large cities. He declared that the Lord has appointed a time when he will visit transgressors in wrath for persistent disregarding of his law. Terrible as was the representation that passed before me, that which impressed itself most vividly upon my mind was the instruction given in the connection with it. Okay, so it's destroyed. But what does it mean? There's an instruction, right? Why was it destroyed? The angel that stood by my side declared that God's supreme rulership and the sacredness of his law must be revealed to those who persistently refuse to render obedience to the King of Kings. Right? The people there have to be told that they are disobeying God, They're disregarding the rulership of God, the supreme rulership of God, and the sacredness of His law. Those who choose to remain disloyal must be visited in mercy with judgments, in order that, if possible, they may be aroused to the realization of the sinfulness of their course. So, my question is, when she talks about this, there is a chance for these people who live in that city to be what? To be converted, right? Because there is a chance. Those who remain disloyal, right, will be visited. But those who want to listen can still be converted, right? Yeah. Right. Must be revealed to those who remain persistently refused, right? But those who chose, you can choose. You can choose to remain disloyal, but you can also choose to obey. Remember, all these cities are destroyed, so not all of them entire nations. Because what? There are still people who can still be converted, right? Still be converted. Okay. But what kind of laws are being perverted here? The supreme rulership. God is the ruler of the people and the nations. But the nations now do not want to follow the rulership of God, right? They now have a church and state relationship, a false church and state relationship with another ruler, right? Another husband, right? Is a false church and state. It's a marriage institution that is corrupted. False church and state, a marriage institution. And the sacredness of His law. Sacredness of His law is what? The law of God, the 10 Commandments, and the central commandment is the 4th commandment. It's about the Sabbath. The two institutions that came out of Eden is being disregarded, right? So we know these things have to be rectified. People have to understand this, right? And they still have a chance to be converted and repent and be converted, right? But what happens? Those who do not want to will receive the judgments. Okay, so just from these verses, just from these Ellen White quotes, does the judgment of the cities, right, where people still have a chance to be converted, happen before the Sunday law or after the Sunday law? Where they still have a chance to be converted. Before the Sunday law, right? Because these people still have a chance to be converted. In other words, before the universal Sunday law. We know that, right? Yeah. Because afterwards, there's going to be judgment, this last 7 plagues. So these judgments will happen. What she's talking about are these judgments that happen before the Sunday law, where there are warnings to cities, right? Where there are still people who will be convicted, repent, and be converted. Okay? All right. We went to Glendale near Los Angeles, and the following night, which was April 17, she had a vision on April 16. And the following night, on April 17, further representations passed before me. I seemed to be in an assembly, setting before the people the requirements of God's law. So he's talking about God's law. I read the scriptures regarding the institution of the Sabbath in Eden at the close of the creation week, and regarding the giving of the law at Sinai. And then I showed that the Sabbath was to be observed for a perpetual covenant, as a sign between God and His people forever, that they may know that they are sanctified by the Lord their Creator. So this is the law of God that is being disobeyed in the great cities, right? A false church and state relationship, as well as the breaking of Sabbath, right? Right. These are the sins in the great cities. Then I dwelt upon the supreme rulership of God, right? So it's a law and the rulership of God above all earthly matters. His law is to be the standard of action. None are to pervert their senses by intemperance or yielding their minds to satanic influences. For this makes impossible the keeping of God's law. Right? If you are intemperate, you are yielding your mind to satanic influences. And it'll be impossible for you to keep God's law. Right? But that goes just perfect. Right? That's the temptations of Jesus. That's the temptations of Eve in the Garden of Eden. Satan tempts them first with indulgence and intemperance. Because if you cannot pass that test, you will not be able to keep God's law. While the divine ruler bears along with perversity, he is not deceived and will not always keep silence. His supremacy, his authority as ruler of the universe must finally be acknowledged and the just claims of his law vindicated. So that means that if you persist in knowing what is right and what is wrong, and you still disobey the law, then you can receive the wrath, right? You cannot receive the wrath if you still don't understand what is it that you're gonna, what is the law of God. You have to completely understand the law of God and say, no, I will not keep it, right? There cannot be a controversy, right? People say, well, I really don't understand the law of God. Is it right that God will actually give them the wrath, the last 7 plagues, to those who do not yet understand a controversial law? It's not going to be a controversial law. It's black and white, right? It's black and white. People will know. The whole world will know, right? Much more instruction regarding the long sufferings of God and the necessity of arousing transgressors to the realization of their perilous position. If people do not know of their perilous position, they don't understand the law. But they have to be aroused to their transgression so that they will understand what it means, right? And then the next day, Wednesday, right? Wednesday morning, April 18, I was to speak in a church in Los Angeles. On the 17th, she was in Glendale. On the 16th, she was in Loma Linda. Now on the 18th, she was to speak in a church in Los Angeles, where the Southern California Conference was assembled. As we neared the church, we heard the newsboys crying, San Francisco destroyed by an earthquake. With a heavy heart, I read the first hastily printed news of the terrible disaster. Right. On 2 days after she saw the vision of the earthquake where all the buildings had fallen. Now this is actually the Los Angeles time from the following day, April 19, right? April 19, I went back and looked at the LA Times. This is the Los Angeles Times, right? The San Francisco earthquake hit April 18 at 5:12 in the morning, right? People were still sleeping. 5 o'clock in the morning. And an estimated magnitude of 7.9 on a Mercalli intensity. It's not on a Richter scale, right? Today we use the Richter scale, right? But in those days they used a Mercalli scale. It's from 1 to 11 or 1 to 12. The modified is 1 to 12, right? This was on a 7.9 on a scale of 1 to 11, right? It was severe, okay? It was severe. The amazing thing is that Ellen White has been predicting this for about 3.5 years, right? For 3.5 years. It's been predicting. Even 2 days before it happened, she had a vision that it was going to happen. Right? Okay, right. 2 weeks later, right? These things are kind of actually quite interesting to read about what happened around this time of this earthquake. 2 weeks later, they went back, I guess, to Elms Haven by the way of San Jose, Mountain View, and San Francisco. As we traveled northward, we saw some of the effects of the earthquake. And when we entered San Jose, we could see that large buildings had collapsed and others had been seriously damaged. At Mountain View, the new post office and some of the largest stores of town had been leveled to the ground. Other buildings had partially collapsed and were badly wrecked. When we saw the fallen walls of the Pacific Press, we were sad at the heart. But we could not help rejoicing over the fact that no lives were lost. Here, as also in San Francisco, the Lord mercifully spared his children. So in Sodom and Gomorrah, Ellen White said, San Francisco and Oakland will be like Sodom and Gomorrah. So Sodom and Gomorrah, were there some spared children of God there? Yes, right? In San Francisco, there were those who were spared. Those who had been working at the Pacific Press, right? And I have a picture of that Pacific Press here. Pacific Press is in Mountain View. Okay, Mountain View is right here. San Francisco is up here, right? Mountain View. So she traveled from San Jose. Here's San Jose right here. Okay. And I think I should put on the red marker here. Turn on the laser pointer. Okay. Here's San Jose right here. And then went to Mountain View. Here's Mountain View. All right. Well, here's Palo Alto, Mountain View. And then you'll go past to San Francisco. But first you went to Mountain View. What is interesting about this Pacific Press is that how strategic this Mountain View place was, because this was the place that all the Adventists moved out of. They used to live in Oakland and San Francisco. They said, no, we cannot live in the cities. So where did they go? They went to a place called Mountain View. And obviously Ellen White had a place up in Elms Haven, up here somewhere, right? Elms Haven is up here. But this is Mountain View. This is where they can get out of the cities. And they built a Pacific Press, right? It was a 171,000 square foot campus, right? Yeah. The thing about it is Stanford is close by. What? Stanford is like Palo Alto, right? Isn't Stanford in Palo Alto? Yeah, I think so. Right? Mountain View is right here. Pacific Press was the largest employer of the city. The Adventist had a huge printing press. It was very, very big. It was amazing how big it was, right? And they printed so many of Ellen White books, right? It was huge. It was the largest employer in the city. Okay. It was built in 1904. So 2 years later, you know, some of the walls fell. Some of the walls fell because of the earthquake, but they quickly rebuilt it, right? Then a month later, it was destroyed by fire. And people says, oh, this is why. This is because we were not publishing Ellen White's books. We were publishing like outside work that the Lord has sent a fire to burn. So, but they continued to have a Pacific Press until the year, I think 1983. 1983, right? The problem is that by 1983, all the workers are becoming very old. And to attract young people to come to work at Pacific Press, none would come. Why? because the cost of living was so high in here, right? So high in 1983. Why? Because this is the tech industry is right here. The prices of real estate was so high, they could not attract workers to come to Pacific Press. So where did they move? They moved to Nampa, Idaho, right? Nampa, Idaho. And who did they sell the Pacific Press to? This is very interesting. It became the largest employer in that city. They sold it to Google. Google's headquarters is in Mountain View, and it used to be the campus of the Seventh-day Adventist Pacific Press, right? Just for your information, you know? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And the reason being, now this is no longer a mountainous or a countryside. This is now a big city, right? Yeah. But it used to be out of the cities, right? 2 weeks later, on a homeward journey, we passed through San Francisco, and hiring a carriage, spent an hour and a half in viewing the destruction wrought in that great city. Buildings that were thought to be proof against disaster were lying in ruins. In some instances, buildings were partially sunken in the ground. The city presented a most dreadful picture of the inefficiency of human ingenuity to frame fireproof and earthquake-proof structures. When it shakes, it liquefies the earth. And then what? The buildings sink. Not only they topple, but they sink. And what happens? It also caused a big fire, right? So there's an earthquake, there's a liquefaction, and there's fires, right? Yeah. Through his prophet Zephaniah, the Lord specifies the judgment that he will bring upon evildoers. So Ellen White then compares to this as the judgment that is written in the book of Zephaniah. And she quoted Zephaniah 1 verse and these verses. And we'll read that, right? God cannot forbear much longer. Already his judgments are beginning to fall on some places, and soon his signal displeasure will be felt in other places. Okay, so Ellen White is, and there's another point that Ellen White says. Do the judgments fall all at one time? It happens in some places, and then it will happen in other places. One at a time, multiple places, right? Right? But it does not happen all in one place, right? It will fall in. His judgments are already falling, right? Okay, we'll read Zephaniah. This is what Ellen White quoted. I will utterly consume all things from off the land, said the Lord. I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of the heaven and the fishes of the sea and the stumbling blocks with the wicked, and will cut off man from off the land, said the Lord. And it shall come to pass in the day of the Lord's sacrifice that I will punish the princesses and the king's children, and all such are clothed in strange apparel, right? These are the rulers of the earth. They will be shaken. They will quake. This is the earthquake, right? Because the princes, the king's children, and those are clothed with strange apparel. Oh, that's the leader of the church, I think. They will be shaken. In the same day also will I punish those who leap on the threshold, those who are getting married, while fill their master houses with violence and deceit. And it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with candles and punish the men that are settled on their lease, and that they say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will they do evil. In Jerusalem, there's going to be people, God's professed people, who will say, no, God will not punish us. Therefore, their goods shall become a booty, and their houses a desolation. They shall also build houses, but not inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards, but not the drink of the wine thereof. Okay. Okay. Oh, that God's people had a sense of the impending destruction of thousands of cities. The destruction will come upon how many of the cities? Thousands of the cities. Does it all happen at one time? No, it does not happen at one time. Are they all completely leveled? No, they're not all completely leveled. Why? Because this happens before the Sunday law, where there will be people who will still be convicted and converted, right? It will not happen all at one time. There's people who will be still saved, right? Those who still want to follow God's law. Now almost given to idolatry. See? Almost given to idolatry. But many of those who should be proclaiming the truth are accusing and condemning their brethren. Oh boy. Wow. Are we accusing and condemning our brethren? Yeah. Instead of just proclaiming the truth? When the converting power of God comes upon minds, there will be a decided change. Men will have no inclination to criticize and tear down. Wow. This is amazing. Yeah. We cannot be criticizing and tearing down. We should just be proclaiming the truth. They will not stand in a position that hinders the light from shining to the world. Their criticism, their accusing will cease, right? Eventually, their criticisms will cease. Everywhere, there are men who should be out in active ministry, giving the last message of warning to a fallen world. The work that should long ago have been active operation to win souls to Christ have not been done. The inhabitants of the ungodly cities, soon to be visited by calamities, have been cruelly neglected. The time is near when large cities will be swept away. And how many? It'll be thousands of cities. Not one, not two, not 100, but thousands of cities. One at a time. Not all at one time. Not complete destructions, but because there are still those who will be saved in them, because they still have a chance. Probation has not completely closed. And all should be warned of these coming judgments. But who is giving to the accomplishment of this work the wholehearted service that God requires? Many need to receive a special fitting up before they will be able to carry forward this work along right lines. And we should be preaching the truth. We should not be accusing or condemning our brethren. And we should not what? Criticize and tear down, right? We should preach the truth. Do not criticize and tear down. Do not accuse and condemn your brethren, right? This is not the time to do that. Okay, my question is, what is the largest city on earth right now? Remember, 1,000 cities will be destroyed. What is the largest city on earth right now by population? What is the largest city on earth by population? Anybody?
Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Sao Paulo, Brazil is number 4.
Oh, wow.
What's number 1? Anybody have a guess? Okay, Uncle. Mexico City is number 5.
China. Chongqing, China. No, China.
Beijing,
China.
Beijing, China is number 8. Shanghai, China is number 3. Chongqing, China is number 14. Chongqing, China is number 14. Shanghai is number 3. All right. Number 2 in the world is Delhi, India. Delhi, India.
Huh?
Yeah, Delhi. Okay, okay, Auntie Maria. I think Auntie Maria, you looked at your phone. You cheated. Tokyo, Japan is number 1. Okay. Okay. All right. What about Manila, Philippines? What number is Manila, Philippines?
14. 17.
Number 17. Number 17. Okay, number 17. Yeah, what about Jakarta, Indonesia? Number 30.
Oh,
Yeah. Right. Chicago is number 39. Remember, thousands of cities. And you know, these big cities are going to be hit, right? You know, I was just amazed. Out of the top 60 cities, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 of the top 60 cities are in China. 17 of the top cities in the world are in China. I can't believe it.
They congregate.
It's pretty amazing. Right?
It's populated.
It's really, all right.
India.
Right. Delhi, India, number 2, and number 1 is Tokyo, Japan, right? These large cities will be swept away. Thousands of cities will be destroyed, right? And it's going to be one at a time until all the people will realize they have been breaking the institutions that God had given, right? Pretty amazing. We are living in the time of the end. The fast fulfilling signs of the times declare that the coming of Christ is near at hand. The days in which we live are solemn and important. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. Okay, plagues and judgments are already falling. Okay. It's not that we said, oh, the last 7 plagues, they are in the future, but Ellen White said the plagues and judgments are already falling. Okay. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. What about earthquakes? Where in the plagues are the earthquake? The last 7th, the 7th plague and the 10 plagues, right? There's earthquake, right?
Yeah.
What about the 10 plagues of Egypt? Is there earthquake there? This is a trick question. Is there earthquake there?
No?
I told you it's a trick question.
Oh, the earthquake is the rulers.
There you go. Auntie Maria got it. Auntie Maria got it. Pharaoh is the power of the earth that quaked, right? Okay, I told you it was a trick question, right? Yeah, it's a trick question. Okay, thank you. At least you guys were listening to the presentation. There's the rulers of the earth, and Pharaoh was shaking, right? When the plagues were falling, right? Yeah. Okay. And then so the earthquake is in the 7th plague. All right. Okay. We're going to transition to the balls of fire, right? The balls of fire. When do the balls of fire fall during the plagues? Okay, here's a question. When do the balls of fire fall during the plagues? Okay, but absolutely, Ochok, you are absolutely right. All right. Okay, but during the last 7 plagues or the 10 plagues of Egypt, where are the balls of fire? In the last 7 plagues and the 10 plagues of Egypt, because Ellen White says these plagues are falling already, right? So where in the 10 plagues of Egypt or the last 7 plagues do you see balls of fire? This is just just to make sure you remember. You're racking your brain now. When?
The hail and fire. The hail and fire.
Oh, there you go. Auntie Maria got it again. Auntie Maria is the hail and fire. Okay, very good. Right?
Remember the hail and the fire.
Hail and fire, right? Exodus 9, verse 22 and 24, 2:24. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch forth thy hand toward heaven. There may be hail in all the land of upon Egypt, upon man and upon beast, in every herb of the field through the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven. And the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran along upon the ground. And the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail. Hail and fire during the 7th plague. Oh, the 7th plague again. All right. The 10th plague is the sons. The last of the 10 plagues is the sons were killed by the destroying angel. This is the 7th plague of Moses, right? Of Egypt, right? So there was hail and fire mingled with hail. Oh, very grievous, such as there was none like it in the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So we know, right? The first 3 plagues happened to Egypt and Goshen. Remember? So that's why these plagues are falling even now. We are also suffering the plagues. Why? Because the first 3 plagues also happen to fall on God's people as well. Right? But the last 7 plagues of the 10 plagues only fall on Ramses. Ramses is the name of the city, right? It does not fall on Goshen, right? Right? Because the 7th plague is hail and fire, right? Hail and fire. And that's why this is my segue into the balls of fire. Balls of fire, right? That's going to come because there's hail and fire, right? The hail comes not only in the 7th plague of the 10 plagues of Egypt, but also the hail comes during the 7th plague of the last 7 plagues, right? Right. Okay. But there's also balls of fire that comes down, right? And Ellen White wrote one of her first writings, way before she was talking about San Francisco and Oakland, she was talking about another city. Do you recognize this city?
Holland.
It's near Holland, but it's not Holland. And
It looks like Curacao.
yeah, it looks almost like Curacao. Where is this? Dwayne, do you recognize the city?
Copenhagen.
Copenhagen. This is Copenhagen. I think of this city given to beer drinking, card playing, gambling, dancing, and revelries. And they hear the last message of mercy, they mock the message and the messengers as in those days, saying, where is the promise of his coming? All things remain as they were from the beginning. When the message has fallen upon the ears of a threatened wrath of God upon the despiser of his mercy, they have mocked at the words of warning. Self-indulgence, love of pleasure, and sin so engross their minds that they care of none of these things. The dwellers in Copenhagen. This is amazing. She specifically said a name of a city. And she predicted the wrath of God will fall on a specific city because of their sins. The dwellers in Copenhagen will be awakened only too late, as were the dwellers in Sodom. Wow. As they awoke in the morning of that eventful day, when the retributive judgment of God fell upon the wicked city, they thought to commence a day of godless riot, when suddenly from the sun shining in the heavens were hurled balls of fire upon the doomed capital. Wow. From the sun shining in the heavens. Wow, it's like the sun is shining and suddenly balls of fire coming from the sky upon this doomed capital. What a scene of misery and screams of anguish and distress was that day of retributive judgment. She wrote this in 1886, right? You know, there was a great Copenhagen fire in 1728, as well as another fire in 1795, right? But she obviously is predicting something that will happen in the future, right? Because it's a retributive judgment. So this judgment, right, comes down on a specific city. Remember, she predicted that San Francisco and Oakland will be hit by the wrath of God. And she says it specifically in not so far in the future it will happen because of the sins in that city. And she also talks about Copenhagen. Remember, Copenhagen she wrote it in 1886, right? Even before she was talking about Sodom and San Francisco and Oakland as Sodom and Gomorrah. She predicted about Copenhagen. Not very many people actually have studied this or read this quotation. This quotation is quite specific because Copenhagen is obviously not in America, right? Yeah, it's not in America. It's part of the largest 1,000 cities, you know. The thousands of cities will be destroyed, right? And it just so happened that, you know, we decided that, you know, we should go and see this place specifically, right? Yeah. And there's a tourist there, right, in Copenhagen. It's called Nyland. It was interesting to just see that city. You know, we see other cities. Seems like a lot of other cities are very wicked, you know, but Copenhagen is also considered very wicked also, right? But anyway, yeah, this judgment comes by way of earthquakes, and also by way of balls of fire, but also pestilences and famines, right? And this is why we're studying it, because next time we will meet, we will do the visions of the ball of fire, right? Okay. There's no other questions or additions. We will end with this until we meet next time and talk about the ball of fire vision that Ellen White had. All right? Okay. And that is a more sure word of prophecy.